how's it all going? Welcome to another video upload from Aspie with Attitude. If you're watching this for the first time, my name is David. I'm from Melbourne, Australia. I have autism, have some speech impairment, and a speech impairment, have Asperger's syndrome, and that's why I call myself an Aspie. So now, welcome to another video upload from Aspie with Attitude, something that I'm doing for episode 246, which is technically going to be a life story, talking about how to actually make friends, talk about differences between social influence and social selection. That's what this video is about. It's just a guide how to make friends and how did I make my friends. In the course of the year 2020, I had a few visits to a psychologist, and I did explain this YouTube channel that you're watching right now, Aspie with Attitude. I only cut this long story short, and I was suggested by my psychologist that I should be uploading video content on how to be more social while living on the autism spectrum. All you need to know is there are a few or a handful of autistic individuals who are socially struggling in life and do not end up having friends. Despite that, every autistic individual wants friends. The worst that comes to worst though, this influences a myth that autistic individuals do not want friends, which this myth, I just say, is busted. Of course, every autistic individual do want friends, whether you're on the spectrum or not. There's a couple of theories on how friends are made, and the two theories are social influence and social selection. I will cover social influences and how social bonds are formed, going by my life experience when I once engaged with the Melbourne hip hop scene from the years 2003 and 2016, as I had explained back in episode 74, when I used to be a hip hop artist. Due to my poor social upbringing in my adolescence, when I did grow up as a trained enthusiast, and I did mention my poor social upbringing in my teenage years back in episode 217, which was autism and rejection. I didn't really connect with my peers or any friends, except for this one bad boy I was friends with from primary school who made my teenage life miserable, and I had to explain this back in episode 77, which was called Who's Your Toxic Friend? I'll quickly mention that from this person, in April 1998, he made me go and see Metallica, since that he was into hard rock and heavy metal. And it wasn't until June or July 1998, that's when I first got into hip hop, starting with Run DMC, Coolio and the Beastie Boys. And that was the time I grew more comfortable under my own skin wearing Adidas tracksuits. In between 1998 and 2003, I did get involved with nightclubs since I liked techno at the time in my late teens and my early 20s, and going to nightclubs didn't go well for me, and which is all explained in episode 186 when I was beat up, so I want to forget about that now. And I'm going to get to, by the time when I was 22 or 23 years old, the hip hop scene became my social influence. I was drawn to the hip hop scene since I saw that the people who was engaged with hip hop dressed the same as me. The friends and my other acquaintances from my youth did not dress the same as me, so they never wore the full Adidas tracksuits at all. On the other hand, that other person who bullied the friendship onto me, the one I used to go to primary school with, had engaged in the heavy metal scene. So like, that was the same bad boy from my teenage past, since I'll mention this for the last time, since I've last mentioned this back in episode 194, like autism and manipulation. And now, like I mentioned back in episode 74, by the time I was 23 years old in 2003, That's why I chose the hip hop scene as my social influence. As this being my coping mechanism for a lack of social life I had with my peers from high school, I like to stay with my hip hop life experience and my life story to explain social selection now. Since that not every hip hop fans are friendly in the hip hop scene, my father had doubts about my engagement with the hip hop scene, since some individuals were possibly drug addicts and others were possibly criminals. The bright side about hip hop was, at least the hip hop scene I experienced was no gang turf warfare like it was in Compton in Los Angeles, America, back in the 1980s and the 1990s, where the Bloods and the Crips fought amongst each other. At least the hip hop scene was never like that. Not what I had experienced back in my days as Rubex. This had become a challenge to select any individuals from the hip hop crowd who were close to my age, had no criminal history, and didn't do drugs or went out and did graffiti. One thing I like to admit here, I was acquainted to some graffiti artists or graffiti writers, and often those friendships were short-lived before I engaged in graffiti, got caught by police and charged for vandalism. And if any of this has happened, how could I just live with myself? Since that's why I never did any graffiti, and that's why I didn't have graffiti vandals as my social selection. Because in my social selection, being best friends with people who did graffiti was deemed to be a bad social influence. So yet again, I'm talking about hanging around with criminals and people with criminal history. So I'm glad that I had that lecture with my parents. And what my parents told me was, I had been given a clear warning that I could land myself in jail for vandalism if I ever socially selected these graffiti people. And this puts all graffiti people out of the question when going through this social selection. Instead, I was more interested in being friends with MCs and DJs, maybe some who are breakdancers. As it happens, rappers, MCs and rhyme lyricists, and on top of it, music producers was who I wanted to be friends with, considering that I wanted to rhyme, I wanted to rap, I wanted to MC and make music and make beats. That's all I wanted to do in the hip hop scene. In the end, my social selection were rappers and music producers, and they were the people to be friends with from the hip hop crowd. By the year 2010, there was eventually this Melbourne rhyme lyricist and music producer who called himself Bastion Killjoy, and I met him for the first time back in 2008. He turned out to be close to my age and living in the same area as me. This music producer, Bastion Killjoy, is from the day on still my best friend, and he's neurotypical, and he told me that he has nephews and nieces who are on the autism spectrum. So he's my best friend who I'm talking about, that I've been friends with for 12 or 13 years now. For the final conclusion, the hip hop scene was once my social influence, finding somebody that I could be friends with for life, and I only just needed one person. After I did leave the hip hop scene back in 2016, that Bastion Killjoy rapper and music producer had become my social selection. And even before joining my local autistic community, when it became my new social influence in 2018, as it happens, it was by 2019, my friend Matt became my new social selection, which has also nurtured another possibility that we could be best friends for the rest of our lives. Everyone who I knew from high school at my age are now married with children, since most do not get the time for themselves anymore. Was it in it for me to connect with my same age peers from high school? This would be a challenge since they all have families now. I feel that everyone who I wanted to be friends with from high school are highly unlikely to have time for themselves these days. Every now and then, I do usually give them a buzz in the messenger through Facebook, just at least see how they're going. I am still getting the time to make YouTube video contents that you're watching now from Aspie with Attitude and be friends with people like Matt. Since that Matt cannot drink any alcohol, I still have Bashing Killjoy, who I can share a beer with, despite that he is also bringing up a family too, with only just one child at the moment. And this is the difference between social influence and social selection, and that's all been explained. And just anything else that didn't make any sense to you, you can always let me know in the comments. I can actually clear it up. In the meanwhile, if you want to show more support to my YouTube channel Aspie with Attitude, please, why not hit the red button to subscribe. That's all I ever ask for in terms of support. There's always a notification bell to keep up to date with Aspie with Attitude. One more thing in terms of support. I wouldn't mind you to come in, please, like and share this video content. That's all I ever ask for in terms of support. And pretty much, that's just my passion and what I love doing when I get the time for myself is to make these autistic YouTube videos. And just to explain how my life's been like, me living in the autism spectrum. And also plus my repeated behaviour and my ritualistic behaviour of doing this now. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening to Aspie with Attitude, peace and respect, and see you next time on Aspie with Attitude.